and welcome to our last episode of HiX-Men Report, where we'll be talking about House of Powers of 10, number 6. We are a bit delayed, and I'm going to be telling you it's actually all the fault of the mutants. We, as human, were offered flowers, like like medications and all of that. I was sick this whole week. I called Krakoa embassy every day. No medication came my way. I cannot believe it, guys. I could not believe it.
It's your insurance plan. You've got to make sure they cover Krakoan medications. I tell you every time, ask your insurance provider, does it cover Krakoan flower drugs?
Well, of course, Professor Xavier would say that.
If you will.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I did not know this, right? I mean, this is like some kind of hidden mutant agenda bullshit that I'm not okay with this, guys. I'm gonna tell you, I'm not okay with this. Finally, I got my voice back today, and here we are to talk about Powers of X. How are you all doing today?
I'm good. It's the weekends and a long weekend, so I'm kind of happy.
Why is it a long weekend?
It's Columbus Day on Monday.
Ugh, you New Yorkers, like too much holidays. Peter, how are you doing?
I'm well. I'm excited to talk about this issue.
Oops.
Apparently non-corporate side here. Is he just like no brain, or what is her name? Martha now? Is he just projecting sheer consciousness towards us?
Well, I'll explain what happened here because some people might not realize I actually died on our last mission of the HiX-Men report. But my mutant soul was uploaded into Cerebro. There's been a delay in processing my new gold ball's body, so I am now broadcasting by way of this computerized avatar until I'm fully restored.
Man.
I'm just telling you guys, we need to read the fine print. I mean, that's what it has all been. We were told eternal life. We were told medication. All of us forgot to read the fine print.
No. You are just a human. You get medicine.
I'm a human.
He gets eternal life, not you.
But I was told that my life will be extended because of this dumb medication, you guys. But anyway.
Well, I think read the fine print is actually a pretty good warning for a lot of the things that go on in this issue, because there's a lot of people who are not entirely truthful or totally go off of what they agreed to do. Mm-hmm. And that is a major, major theme running through Powers of X number 6. No big final explosion, lots of very small stabs in backs.
Right.
And two larger ones.
Yeah, right. and one very large stab in stomach.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, so with that out of the way, Peter, why don't you get us started?
Well, sure. Everybody always loves to start with our opening quotes here, and I actually don't have the issue in front of me yet. Who has the opening quote?
I have it. And now we build Professor Xavier.
And interestingly, we have no cold open here. It goes right to the title page, and on the title page it says when they learn the truth. Which is an interesting double entendre here, because there's definitely a concern as the issue goes on about the rest of the mutants learning the truth. So it's not just about Moira, showing the truth to Xavier and Magneto.
Yeah, and I think this is the first time we have confirmation that the rest of the mutants do not know about Moira at all.
Yeah, but let's begin with the first scene here. So we actually have number 1. It's pretty much the whole bench scene from that, with just this first page added of kind of Xavier taking a stroll through the woods. And then we have 6 pages from Powers of X number 1. And it has it has all of the same art and all of the same dialogue, but we might have a slightly different opinion upon it now than we did that so many weeks ago. So Freya, what is your thinking about revisiting this scene from Powers of 10 number 1?
So I kind of forgot that the whole scene was there before. Like, I do remember the bench scene because, that was kind of, at this point, that has been hammered in our head. But I actually kind of liked all this very Shakespearean dialogue that was going on. I don't know why, but I'm like, oh, these are very fitting all of a sudden. And then there was like all this, like, your dream has to shatter, at the whole thing about No, that happened later. Sorry. So you're kind of like brings it all together, and it was just kind of like a final closing chapter. It felt like it was a Cliff Note version, kind of. That's what I felt.
Tyler?
I kind of was a little bit upset that they repeated the entire 6 pages. I mean, because basically we are charged like a double size issue, and we didn't get double size new pages. So, I mean, we get like 6 pages here, we get like 1 or 2 more, or actually 1 3/4 at the end. So, I feel a little bit cheated because I don't necessarily think that we need the entire 6 pages for the repeat.
Zach?
So I know that that's an opinion that a lot of people have. And if you're buying it week to week, it's a valid opinion because you did spend this money and you feel like you want to get your money's worth for every page.
Yeah.
I feel like this is an area where we really need to judge Hickman on the basis of the full story that he's telling. Because if you look at this as one big story instead of a bunch of different weekly stories, this is a really valid and very cinematic technique to go back to. It's obviously a technique that Hickman loves, but to go back to the scene that we've seen earlier, but with new context and replay it for us. And given that I'm usually pretty critical of Hickman when he's just dry and factual and doesn't engage in real drama, I don't want to criticize him when he actually engages in techniques that I think lend a little bit of storytelling flair to what he's doing. So I don't begrudge this.
The reason that I thought it was interesting, and I tend to fall a little bit more on Zach's side, I don't know if we needed all 6 pages of it. I think the thing we really needed was to hear all of Moira's dialogue again. And so getting 6 pages that is fine. But there are 2 really, really stuck out to me with a reread, knowing all that we know up until this point. So you have to remember, when we first read it, this was the first scene in terms of our experience of this time travel. We didn't know that Moira had multiple lives. We didn't know that the Apocalypse Live even existed, let alone that it was life number 9. So the first thing that really struck out to me is the tarot cards, which we had so much speculation about the first time because we were like, maybe it means they're going to show up. Maybe it means she knows them from somewhere. Well, she does clearly know them from somewhere. And the them I'm referring to are both Rasputin and Cardinal, who turn up in the cards sandwiching the spire, which we've seen repeated across many motifs and periods in this. But I definitely think that now we know she doesn't have some special knowledge of them coming back. They're not like super influential mutants. They're just the 2 people that she knows kind of sacrificed themselves in order to make this go possible. So it definitely changed my perception of the tarot cards a little bit. Anybody else with some thoughts on that?
Yeah, and sacrificed themselves, and to her mind, very recently, because this is life 10 and they just died in life 9. Yeah. So if we think of this from Moira's perspective, even though we've been seeing this whole series shuffled up out of order in lots of different ways, this is what she's coming just out of. These are people who died just as she did for the sake of bringing back this really vital information that she's about to pass along to Xavier.
But was it just now? Because she's old. She's
Well, I don't mean just like a moment ago, but I mean from her perspective, from somebody who's lived more than 1,000 years, this is quite recent.
That from her lifespan, right? Because she's at least 2,000.
Right.
Roughly.
Well, I mean,
almost 2,000 years old.
Just in life 6 alone, she has a very, very, very long life.
Yeah.
Well, and you have to think that getting to the bench team with Xavier for her is like playing World 1.1 in Super Mario Brothers at this point. Like, she knows where all the turtles are, and she knows how high to jump. Like, she has done this a number of times. And she's trying not to have too much of an effect up to this point, I don't think, because she doesn't want to alter too much. At least we have no hint that she does. So I kind of see more as being on autopilot to a certain degree until she gets to this scene.
So having one thing kind of stuck out to me though this time around reading it is like, why those 2 in particular? There were other people who also gave their lives. Like, why she is like fascinated by their sacrifices?
I think it's a really interesting question because we keep speculating about the black hole, but she was only alive long enough to have the stuff downloaded from the file that Wolverine brought to her, and wasn't there to witness those. She didn't know that Rasputin was going to remove Zorn's helmet. So I think we have to be careful about how much we went into it. I know a lot of us really want to see Rasputin again, but it's hard to know how much meaning to it.
Yeah, I mean,
so
I
other
think
thing,
this is just one of the seeds. Oh no, I'm just saying that this might be just one of the seeds that Hickman has planted for future stories, or he's just leaving it there, for us to speculate for a while.
Right. No, because I was kind of thinking like that since they died, like we didn't see them, they haven't come back yet. I mean, I was just thinking that maybe I missed something. That's why I was asking the question. Like,
but
looks like I haven't.
Here's the other one that really stuck out to me, and I'll throw this over to Zach to begin with because it's the kind of thing Zach and I talk about late at night. Moira says that the whole carnival, it's just a show for those who need one, a distraction from what's going on, if you will. And I have some thoughts on that, but Zach, did that stick out to you any differently the second time around?
Well, a little bit. I think on the one hand, Hickman is allowing this to hit the reader and realize that the reader should now be picking up on things that they should have been the first time around, but were being deliberately hidden from them by sleight of hand.
Yes.
It's also, I think, as we're going to see later on, when we get to some of Moira's journal entries, a hint that maybe Xavier, even after this scene, is not fully privy to what's really going on. That Moira is playing all kinds of sleight of hand, both with the reader and with Xavier.
Yeah, and I mean, I also saw it as Hickman doing a little bit of laugh on the series. We've talked about how his original pitch was most likely much closer to just Pox than Pox and Hox.
Right.
And I definitely think some of the material in House of X was a little bit of a distraction to what we were really supposed to be paying attention to. Thinking about all of the time that we spent analyzing like House of X 3 and 4 when they're going on the mission, that was actually quite straightforward. The whole point was just to kill them. When really a lot of
any vehicle to kill those characters off,
yeah.
so we could see them come back in gold ball eggs. I mean, that was it. That's the only reason that had to be there.
Yeah, and we were so fixated on Husk died first, and Marvel Girl doesn't sound like herself, and Monet said, I don't know, Jean, but like I think it was kind of all just a little bit of a distraction, personally, to take our eyes away and to make sure we felt enough shock when we got to the big revelations in the back half of the series.
Mm-hmm. No, I think that's right.
No, I actually thought that it was still like, Hickman talking to the readers directly. Like
Yeah.
it wasn't necessarily like, Moira talking. It was like, or not just the readers, also to the Marvel editors. Like, just say the entire, everyone who's like currently writing is like, none of you have any idea what I'm about to unleash. Just like Secret Wars.
I mean, in a way, I think House Pox is Hickman saying, paying a little bit of homage to stories that came before, and then saying that I'm not doing this anymore. I'm done with this. This is what I'm going to bring the X-Men and the X-Titans, going forward. This is what's going to happen. We're opening up new avenues and new type of stories, and and not redoing things over and over and over again.
Right. Just like, Moira's life, 10th life, stage that we're going to do something, we're going to fuck shit up. That's what it was. That's what it sounded like still to me.
Yeah.
We move on here from this first scene to our X to the third power, which is the year 1000 in the preserve. And this scene, it's pretty lengthy and it's got a huge amount of information and revelations. But and I know a lot of people have been confused about these scenes in Power of 10, but the gist of it is the librarian is not a character that we actually know. He's keeping Moira and Wolverine as his two quote-unquote human specimens in this preserve because humanity has become basically post-human at this point. And he's been keeping Moira alive because at some point the humans cotton on to what her power is, possibly by serving her. And they can't let her die before they reach godhood. And so the librarian has reached this big philosophical choice of, is it truly godhood for me if I become a god through joining the machines, or should I let Moira try this all over again, knowing that I'm giving myself up? Am I giving myself up in either context? That's the best I can do in a first shot. I'm sure we're going to get a lot more as we go around because there's a lot here. So Freya, why don't you begin with talking about our last visit to, and one final point. It is life number 6.
That's right. As we've speculated on many times before here, this turns out to be verified.
Yes. There should be a Peter is right theme song.
Or at least an icon that we flash up on screen every time this issue it's going to... Because, ladies and gentlemen, this will not be the last time that Peter is right this issue.
Peter is always right. No, but the thing is, like, speaking of, Peter being right or Peter mind washing me, because one thing that first came to my mind is just looking at it is the colors. I actually paid attention to colors and the art, which I never do. It's because of Peter I'm doing this. Like, and that's like the first thing. I'm like, ooh, it's just like this habitat and like, where they're all there. And so is this the one that we saw at the end of Powers of X? Like one?
Number
this
one,
is
that's
the
right.
Yeah.
This is the habitat that we saw.
And the two remnants who were preserved in there were presumably Moira and Wolverine.
Yep.
Why they were not wearing any clothes in that version of the scene is a mystery that we will have to solve at a later date.
But that's not the case, though, because there are other humans that are there.
It could have been given the context.
Human-esque.
Yeah. Like, but the thing is that the question that came to my mind, though, is like, there's like, I first thing came to mind, I'm like, Zach and Peter will tell me what this is all about. So I'm going to wait for that. Zach, Peter, and Tyler. And, and then the second thing is, though.
I'm an afterthought.
Like, Tyler's an Tyler comes in and then brings in all the rhetorical questions. But the thing is,
gave you that imaginary beer last week. How could you?
Oh, like, how do you know I didn't force it into the? That was this thing that why does Moira live so long? So Moira cannot be killed, like cannot die unless she's killed. She's immortal.
No, because we saw back in her first life that she has apparently a natural lifespan of like 70 some odd years.
Yeah.
So it's not
she ate a lot more oat bran while she was in the preserve. We don't know, but
yeah, it's not totally clear why she lives that long. We're not actually told that specifically. It's possible that the librarian or his or her predecessors were deliberately doing this, preserving Moira somehow. There's also a kind of weird offhand reference to Moira and Wolverine sharing the same blood type.
That's so weird.
Yeah.
Like, is he just giving her like manual blood transfusions for the past?
Yeah, I'm not quite sure how to interpret
That's why they're naked.
It could just be a reference to the two of them having a mutant gene, and that could just be a weird way to phrase that, or there could be something else at work. I really don't know. It wasn't totally clear to me.
Yeah.
No, because the thing is, like, the whole blood type thing, I was going to bring that up next. It's like, is Wolverine's blood capable of doing that? That's his power? Or is that the power of all mutants, that their blood can be transfused into other people and they will have that power?
No. The answer to all of those questions.
You're sailing off on a fan ship there. No, that's not a mutant thing.
Yeah.
I was riding on that very high. Then I'm like, no, calm down. That's not what's going on.
But there's clearly something. I mean, Hickman doesn't do these things by mistake. He does them either to tell us something or to distract us from something, and we just have to decide which one it is. I think.
I mean,
right. But the thing is, like, I was sorry, Tyler. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. You finish first.
No, I was just gonna say though, reading this, it's like I have read this somewhere else before, and I was incensed by it because I'm like, come fucking on, you have done it, like, you have ripped off that book enough, and you're doing it again. Because, ladies and gentlemen, this is the exact same thing that happens in the first 15 months of Harry August. That
oh boy,
Harry was actually kept aside, was held hostage so the antagonist can go and do their thing, and then Harry was actually kind of trapped in a way so he can't kill himself and restart the whole thing. And
so
I'm like,
not to like Hickman totally off the hook here, but there is a different spin to this here, because it's not just that the villain wants to get away with an evil scheme and Moira is being kept out of the way. It's that the metaphysics that we get from this are that there are only two ways to survive the end of a timeline, which are either, number one, be Moira and just be reborn along with the timeline, and by virtue of being reborn, create a new timeline, or get to a black hole and join with a Dominion, which is the plan of these transhumans to go from Phalanx to Dominion. So, I mean, that is the specific purpose why Moira has to be kept alive this long. She just needs to live long enough for them to join this, what's called the Godhead here, to literally become part of the greater God that can survive every death of the universe.
Because to Zach's point, that we get this great line from the librarian that confirms something we've all as a community been arguing about, which is he says to Moira, when you annihilate this timeline or reality. So that really confirms this idea that Moira is like an old school cassette tape, and you rewind and you tape over what was there before, and there's no remnant reality consciousness. There's no hope for anybody to go on. I don't know that there's any way to prove that. He could have just learned that by basically eavesdropping and hear what Moira's assumption has been based on her past 5 lives, but it definitely clears that up, something that the mechanics of which people have been questioning for 12 weeks now.
Well, but then again, this is from a character who has eavesdropped on Moira. So while that is certainly a much probable case right now, I would argue that it may not be, because we have not seen anything beyond it.
Yeah, I don't think that this is an area where we need to push back.
Yeah.
I think that the idea of how timelines restarting work is given to us in the context of this issue as something that we are supposed to take very seriously as just the baseline mechanics of how Hickman is seeing the Marvel universe now. I think if there's anything that we can question, because there's really no way for the librarian or anyone else to know for sure, it's what happens when you join the Godhead, or whether or if there's anything beyond the Godhead. That part still lies in sort of hazy realm of everybody's speculation in this issue. But everything else, I think we're supposed to take as kind of a given.
No, but then we still have multiple universe here, right?
Like
in
Marvel we just
universe.
Have a timeline that starts over multiple times.
What I mean is multiverse still exists in the current Marvel universe.
I thought that was
because I think that's a bigger topic than we can get into here, because there's the idea that Franklin has been recreating things, but has he recreated all the ones that existed previously? And is his act of recreation now kickstarting it so that they can branch and recreate for themselves? And having read every issue of Marvel since then, I don't think they've definitively answered that.
Yeah, so that's why I'm saying that, like, while it is probable, I mean, it sort of like becomes a little bit clearer, we are still not 100% sure that that is the case.
Well, I think what we're given
information to him, because he's eavesdropping, and Moira can say whatever the hell she wants, and they are gonna believe him.
Well, I think that for the purposes of this story, we're given information that we just are supposed to take as axiomatic in order to understand anything about the story going forward, and this is axiomatic. The universe is obliterated and starts over when Moira is reborn. That's how it works. And if you want to survive it and not be Moira, you need to be part of God. And that's the plan that the librarian and their cohorts are trying to do.
I thought Peter was trying to show us something, but apparently not. Never mind.
So let's go back to what started that parenthetical. Is Zach basically saying the librarian here has decided there's only 2 ways to move forward? Well, actually, no, the librarian hasn't decided that. First, there's only 2 ways to escape: be Moira or become God. And so then the librarian is trying to decide if he would rather become God. And he says this very interesting thing, which is that he can't decide if the immaterial existence is real. He calls the universal machine state what I suspect might be a fake existence.
Right. And this takes us back, to my mind, to some of those conversations that we've had about this sort of Martin Buber notion of equality versus fraternity. This is the threat that we talked about of what happens when you have perfect equality without any sense of individual soul. Is it really immortality if you are completely losing yourself, both your body and your individuality, just to become part of this greater whole that's going to outlive the universe? Is that an infinite existence that you really even want?
And then everyone becomes Matrix pod. Like, that's pretty much what it is. Like, you're just, shelved in like data centers.
Well, no, because even then you get to be individual. I mean, this is even worse than that, because there's nothing, in a fundamental sense, there's no you left. There's just something bigger. You're only something bigger, and you're not yourself anymore. So how do you hold the real puzzle that Moira is in some way trying to solve with her final chance at life is, how do you hold on to yourself while also avoiding this ultimate fate of obliteration.
Yeah, I think there's a really interesting question here of who does it benefit? Like, clearly, when we saw the Elder a few Powers of Tens ago merge with this phalanx consciousness, and first he sends it a test message to make sure that some amount of knowledge can be sustained. So I think that at that level, there's an indication that whatever the society has arrived at in terms of knowledge, technology, and advancement can live on in the realm of being absorbed by this hive mind or stronghold or whatever level you get up to. But then the Elder himself is disintegrated, so he doesn't actually get to become a person in this greater whole, and that's actually what's about to happen to the librarian. So the thing he's really trying to decide is all of our advancement as a society worth sending on to this Godhead? Because I don't think there's really any chance for him to necessarily maintain any sense of self based on what we saw from what happened to the Elder.
Well, I think he's defining his self as a record of his mind and his thoughts and his memories, which is, of course, exactly the same way that Xavier has defined it when we see him uploading all these mutant minds to Cerebro and then putting them in new bodies. But the librarian now has this sense of doubt that we have not seen Xavier exhibit so far, which is, well, is it really the same person if you do that? Or does the old person die and really never come back, and you've just created something else? They're not living on at all.
So
Freya,
why is
Tyler?
No,
Freya?
I was just saying that why is he suddenly having this crisis of conscience? Like, where is that coming from?
Because because the world is going to be destroyed the next day. He suddenly realized the consequences of his plan, and he's wondering if maybe Moira should talk him out of it.
He's just trying to
Well,
figure
he's
out
just
is
come
it
from a
worth it?
very unsettling scene with the Elder, where the Elder just gets poof disintegrated. Like that presumably what just happened.
Right.
Oh, that's true. That's true.
And it's more like, I mean, is it worth it to become a small part of God if I'm no longer myself? I think that was the question that he asked himself, right? But I think but I have another question here too. So assuming that when Moira dies, the world gets reset, right? Then the question, I think, if I'm Moira, my question would be, if I actually achieve my aim, how would I avoid resetting the universe? Because I cannot be alive forever, which means that if I die, me being Moira, whatever I have achieved is going to end.
Exactly right. Exactly right. And
So I mean, the librarian gave her the answer, I think.
I am inclined to say so too. And I think that we're going to see things throughout this issue that, while not saying that directly, because I think that the question of how Moira's accomplishments are going to outlive her somehow is something that Hickman is saving for the long game. That's going to be the standing question of, I suspect, the bulk of his run far beyond this.
Mm-hmm.
I think that this issue does give us a path forward to that.
Yeah, I think that's something which we have to sort of watch out for.
And I think it also, from that lens, seriously recharacterizes what we knew about lives 7, 8, and 9. We've been talking this whole time about what happened in life 6 to radicalize her so much further. Well, let me just put this out there and then get to my main point. We don't know what happened in life number 6. All we know is she wound up in the captivity of this mutant or this human and enhanced human alliance. We don't know anything about who she aligned herself with this life, what she did for the first 50 to 100 years. We just don't know. So that has remained in the mystery box. But it really does kind of characterize, first she's like, well, I wonder if I removed all of the machines, if humans couldn't get to this point. And so that explains life 7 really well. And also life number 9, we realize that while she did want to know when Nimrod would come about, there's something more to life 9, which is the idea that she was in long-term stasis away from Earth in a completely protected way, because that prevents the universe from resetting. This represents her fear about life 10. Like, what if she does get it right? What happens when she dies? It's the question that anybody would ask themselves in a non-Xavier growing you from a gold ball pod reality. What happens when we die? But for Moira, it's a really serious question, because what happens if the timeline just resets and she's not born? Then
Right, because she's been told that life 10 is her
life number 9. Quite possibly is her last. Yeah. So I think a big part of it is like her trying to figure out how to take herself off the board eventually, which we see that she has done in life number 9.
Well, and then of course the other big thing, which we haven't actually said directly here, which is that this is where she's told that the victory of humans over mutants is inevitable, that there is no amount of accommodation that mutants are ever going to achieve with humankind. Mutants are the next step in evolution. They would displace humanity if left to themselves, but they're never going to be left to themselves. Humans are always going to turn against them. They will always cage them. And the threat is not technology itself, as has been implied in some of the other times that we've seen Moira's lives, but technology as harnessed by humans. And on that one data page where we saw that based on Moira's past lives, she had learned that while artificial intelligence was inevitable, its trajectory was not, and that Nimrod could be set to a different purpose. We now know that this is how she discovers that. She discovers that because the librarian told her in Life 6 that the machines were just a tool that humans had created to destroy the mutants. So she knows that technology can be used for a different purpose instead.
So isn't that like a reason enough for her to be radicalized? Like, to go jump into action the way she did?
Not just radicalized, but radicalized in the next life to go after humans, not machines, but to go on this assassination spree against the Trask family. It's like, all right, maybe technology will come into existence, but I'm going to kill off these guys, so maybe it won't be used to destroy mutants.
Right, it really recharacterizes that.
That's exactly what the librarian says. Like, the Sentinels brought us years. And so that's where she was going after the smaller things first, because she was just trying to get it out of from the roots. That's why it made sense that she went after the Trask. No?
Right. That's exactly right. And of course, now that we know the context of Life 6, that lines up. And it also does, I think, something really... I think that this is Hickman's first big rug pull with regard to the mutant metaphor. That throughout this series, and especially with the close of House of X number 6, he gave the impression of having totally reversed the mutant metaphor as we previously understood it. That mutants were now no longer somebody that a race that was going to be forever persecuted, forever feared and hated. They were finally on top of the world and would remain there. And what we learn in this scene here is that that's just not true. That mutants, in fact, are, as we have always been told they are. They are going to be persecuted. They're going to be feared and hated. And this is still the fate that they need to get out of. And that's what Krakoa is intended to do, but we don't know that it's actually going to do it.
Well, I think that is one of the reasons why Forge is doing machine with biological. I mean, I feel like, well, if the humans can harness machines to give them a leg up, so why can mutants do that too?
Right. Yeah. Well, and I think there's something else, something that I think was really effective in this scene too, which is at the same time that he brings back this sort of more traditional version of the feared and hated mutant metaphor, he also shows a different way out, which is when we first see Wolverine show up in this scene, he is encouraging all of the other mutants in this preserve to engage in this ridiculous doomed rebellion again and again and again, to spreading stories of revolution so that they will try to shake off their enslavement, even though it's clear they are not going to be successful. And this is in stark contrast to what we saw back in an earlier Powers of 10 issue, where the transhuman priest is preaching the virtues of slavery in heaven. And here's Wolverine saying that no matter the circumstances, the mutants are not going to be slaves. They are going to refuse to serve their masters. And so I think that this is a really fantastic recontextualizing of the mutant metaphor, that what ultimately are mutants, they are the ones who are not going to submit to slavery. No matter where they are, no matter what mankind is doing to them, they will never be slaves. This is what a mutant is, Jonathan Hickman.
Yeah, I completely agree with that, because something that stuck out to me is that, like, I feel as though in Life 9, the machines were characterized as being more in control of the humans, and because the humans were in that slave state, which kind of made me question, like, well, is he right at all? Like, does Moira learn something different? But I think your point is actually the truth of the matter, which is that the thing that we really learn here is that it's the mutant's job to always kind of disrupt this human-machine symbiosis that eventually happens. And that's borne out by the subsequent data page, which is like they get in this constant cycle where humans innovate and the machines innovate and humans innovate, and that mutants are a disruptor because they're not part of the natural cycle.
They are, in other words, the thing that breaks the technological singularity, because that's what that cycle is. That's technology forcing things to move faster and faster and faster until humans lose control of this process that they started. Mutants are the thing that breaks that cycle. They by virtue of being the next step of humanity, they re-inject humanity into this cycle of technological evolution that would otherwise be unstoppable.
Yeah.
So just wanted to mention it one more time. Everyone, please go read First 15 Lives of Harry August, because that was also, the whole thing, like giving humans technology earlier and earlier, was also a part of that book.
So there you go.
Yeah.
That was the whole thing. The protagonist was trying to stop the antagonist from giving internet to Adolf Hitler. That was the whole, that's why he was trying, because that's what he was trying to do. Like every reset, he remembered all the technology and he would try to make them ahead of time. So humans were like evolving way too fast to have any control over them. Like it was not natural. And I think that's where it's going as well. Like the human evolution is actually not natural, because if technology is involved, that means, it's being driven by humans.
Yeah, I mean, coming back to one point which I was trying to say earlier is, how did Moira survive so long? I mean, we have seen the world, and I can't remember what's the dome that the maker made in the Ultimate Universe, where time is sped up. So we can sort of assume that they can slow down time or so in some ways. So that could be one reason why, or one possible explanation of like how Moira survived so long. But, I mean, I'm just throwing it out there.
Well, connected to that, and the why of her surviving so long until they actually figure out that she's the key here is the librarian says this thing: observation is more important than preservation. And it seems like a throwaway line at first, just like one of these truisms that the librarian spouts, but Moira almost directly repeats it later in the issue when she's talking about Xavier, and we'll get to that. But I think that there's something really, we thought the whole point of the librarian was preservation, right? Like ever since the first issue, we see him with Silabel in the tank that made us think that it was Life 9. And he's kind of saying, oh, that's fine. But, it comes with him learning Moore's plan, him learning English to learn Moore's plan, that the observation you do of the thing you're preserving is so much more important than preserving it, which is like way different than saying, oh, we're keeping this species from being extinct because it has intrinsic value. Yeah. It's almost like a saying that nothing has intrinsic value. Only what you learn from it has value.
That's right. Which for Moira is how each of these lives must feel. She knows they're going to come to an end. She knows it's going to be starting over. So all that's worth anything is what she can learn through observation as a scientific experiment.
Yeah, I viewed that line as the actual thing that radicalized her. She's like, why am I busy trying to lead a good life? Let me do really terrible things for the next 3 lives. Observation is way more important than preservation.
So the question is, though, what was the point of X3 then? Like, because this was
narratively.
Seriously, I'm genuinely asking, because this is the 6th life, so it's already gone. We're at 10th life now, or 11th, whatever. 10th life. All right, we are at 10th life. So what was the point? Like, what did we learn from this?
Well, let's go around and talk about that one. Tyler, what do you think the point was of having all of these scenes?
I mean, my main takeaway is this is the point at which Moira formulated a plan and have a way out of maintaining her success. I think that was actually my main takeaway, that she figured out somehow that there's an existence that is not going to be bound by her dying, because as far as she's concerned, every time she dies, the universe resets. Whether it's true or not, let's just not talk about that. But as far as she's concerned, everything resets when she dies. But here, she discovered a possible way of elevating herself such that she either lives on forever, or she doesn't matter whether she dies or not, because she's outside of time and space. I think that is the beginning of her trying to reach that point.
Zach?
Yeah, no, I think that Tyler nailed it exactly. I think that this is in some ways the vital sequence of this entire series. This is what the series is there to tell us, because it gives us both the stakes that Moira is fighting against. Mutants are always going to be caged and destroyed unless something is done to stop that. And number two, the way around the risk that Moira is running, that nothing she ever achieves will be worth anything, which is there is a way to survive the destruction of the universe. There is a Godhead. There is a dominion out there, and reaching it is a path to immortality.
I'd agree, and I think narratively that a lot of people I think are going to come away with this with the opposite impression that I think that they should get, which was it was a distraction. It's like Moira said in the first scene with the carnival, that Hickman was just doing this to make us look in the other direction. But I don't feel that way at all. I feel like it was meant to establish a sense of scope for us, not only because it was 1,000 years in the future, but because we got this idea of the scope of civilizations, and that like it's not enough for there to be 100,000 safe mutants or 1,000,000 safe mutants. It's truly about the powers 10 lasting. She not only has to increase to the size of humanity, but beyond it, because Earth is just one planet on a galactic scale. And I think that like even if we don't literally engage with the Stronghold and the Titan and the Dominion, although I suspect we will by the time Hickman is through, I think that that sense of dwarfing the scope of the mutant struggle as it is currently on Earth was really important. But I also think Hickman loves to show you the end at the beginning. He does it in almost every series. And so I really think that there's something to this, much like the opening frames of his Avengers world introduced in Avengers in 2013, that is spoiling the end, and we won't understand how until we get to the end.
Right. And I was, that's kind of where I was thinking of, more along the line of that nothing has been actually established, like, or just this is something that was just an information that was given and we're going to have to see it. But I just wanted to kind of know from the group if there was other thing. And it didn't even cross my mind until Tyler said, like, it's like a one information, like we were following this sequence, so Moira can learn one information. Moira could have asked any minority and they would have told her the same thing, but just rather than going through all of this. But anyway, I'm done.
Well, so final round on life number 6.
I was kind of like, a little disappointed to find out this was number 6. I'll be honest, because I was kind of hoping, even though it does, like you guys said, like it does open up the scope so much, to me it was very anticlimactic that it was life number 6. I was like, really? I was like, I actually did a double take. I'm like, what? Yeah. This is me holding my iPad. I'm like, what? But, it's what it is.
No, the thought actually, the same thought actually occurs to me when I read it like early on Wednesday morning. I was like, oh, this is so, I was like, this is so anticlimactic, because I was hoping that it'd be something else. But then upon reading it again, and I was like, maybe, there is a reason why it is there. Because after reading it, I was like, oh, okay. And the other thing I want to kind of point out is that I think Wolverine here is a little bit more assertive than when he has the seed of apocalypse in him. Because here he's like, well, don't worry, darling. This is what I do.
This is what she learned it, though.
Huh?
This is where she learned the code so that she could repeat it. And
yeah, but then, like in Life 9, Wolverine was a little bit, I'm not so sure, blah, 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 and but over here she's like, no, over here Wolverine knows what he's supposed to do.
Yeah,
well, and I think that that's an indication of like Wolverine by de facto of course of elimination has become a leader here, and it's reflected in his comments about revolution as well. And we tend to look at the Xavier Magneto apocalypse triad because Hickman's been leader can be in charge, and it changes the nature of their decisions. We saw that with Jean Grey in X-Men Red, and we see it with Wolverine here. He's got to be decisive because he's all that's left to decide.
Mm-hmm.
Zach?
Well, it's an interesting depiction of Wolverine, I think, because I think, as far as Wolverine is concerned, I think it's an interesting depiction because the way I read this, the tone that I get from all of the way that Hickman has written Wolverine throughout this series is he doesn't have a whole lot of brains, but he's more of a moral center of mutantdom and the X-Men than I think we've seen from a lot of other writers. That what he is somebody who believes passionately in freedom and who's willing to do violence but never happy about it. He just knows that sometimes it has to be done for this cause and the survival of his people. And so I think we can see why he's not on the quiet council of Krakoa, because he is an unhappy warrior, but he's a vital soul of the mutant cause in a way that I think it's really interesting that Hickman would use him.
Yeah, I mean, that's the way that he was being depicted in the very first Claremont and Miller miniseries. Mm-hmm. So it sort of like goes all the way back there, that central samurai character that the two of them gave him.
I guess my only reaction I haven't had yet to Life 6 is, I was certain that this was Life 6, but I really thought that it would be more working with the machines in some way, even if she wasn't the elder or the librarian, because it felt like that was the thing that would radicalize her. But actually, I'm actually very satisfied. Like, to me, I got to the end of it and I was like, this was dense with thematic content. It establishes this link between Moira and Wolverine again. I mean, are we all just waiting for the Moira and Wolverine team up series? Is that maybe the series that Hickman keeps saying he's the only one who would be interested in writing? Because I'm ready. I'm ready for Moira and Wolverine team up. Like, let's go.
That's right.
And then I also found it really satisfying because I really feel like I understand why she was radicalized now. And that was important to me to come away with almost more than anything else. I think if it had been left in a black box and we went forward without understanding why she acted like she did in Life 7 through 9, I would have been like really disappointed. So I'm that 5% of the audience that said they like Pox better. And to me, this made it all worthwhile.
Nice. All right. Shall we move on?
So we get one brief data page after this, and it's something we've kind of already discussed, so I don't know how much more we have to add to it, which is the idea of that there's humans and there's mutants, and then there's post-humans. And the post-humans are in that singularity recycling with the machines. Anything else that we need to say about that before we move on?
No.
Yeah, no, I think I my point.
We got it. Okay.
Yeah.
So the next scene returns us to the bench. And we very briefly see that Xavier's not doing so well with this sudden knowledge. And we also get the sense of Xavier's inherent goodness, perhaps a Xavier we've never seen before. He thinks perhaps if he was more selected with his future students and didn't focus so much attention on a dude with bird wings, that everything could turn out better. And Moira kind of says like, oh, that's really great that you're so ideal and idealistic. And Xavier says, thank you. And Moira says, Zach,
it's not a compliment.
It's not a compliment. So what did we think about this scene of Moira's, the beginning of Moira breaking Xavier? 50 Shades of Moira.
So I love this dynamic. I love it so much. First of all, I love that Moira has come into Life 10, which she knows is going to be like her last big shot, with an absolutely take no crap attitude, because she knows Xavier, and the Xavier that we're getting here, he's kind of an idiot. Like, he's got a good heart and he wants to get along with humanity, but he's just a goober, and Moira knows it. Like, he does not have the brains to pull off what it's going to take to get mutant kind to survive. And the only way that she's going to get him to pull this off is just to absolutely whip him into line. And we're going to see over the next few pages that is a much harder task than she had hoped.
Faria?
No, I mean, to me, this is like everything that I was telling about X-Men or mutants. Like, it just all culminated here. That it's like, no, honey, stop. Like, it just pretty much like, I would like, it's like, that's not a compliment. It's like, I've thought that it was like equivalent of saying, just stop. Like, because it just, how many times they have tried it? Like, or how many times, time and time again, it's like, no, we're still going to work with humans. No, it's not going to work. And this is just, I thought that, I took over Moira's body, and then I was telling her to say these things because this spoke to me. Like, this were like, from my
It
heart.
felt very Freya to me as I was reading it. Like it
Right,
just
right.
really felt like it was in line with what you've been feeling this whole time.
Right. I mean, it's just like, enough. We've done it. Like, we've tried it. We've done all of these things. Let's just try something new. Let's just, like, just kick everything and then build something new. That's what I always say about everything. So, this was that moment.
Tyler?
Well, I mean, at that point, Xavier has not really tried it. I mean, he lived Moira's life, of course. But I mean, to be fair to him, like, it probably takes a while for him for the whole thing to sink in, to make him realize that it's not going to work. But I kind of like, well, I mean, I kind of like the scene where the face that Moira made when Xavier read her mind and was like, how, right? And she's like looking at him like, I mean, now, yeah, bitch, now you know. This is what happened. And she's like not even smiling. She's just like squinting her eyes and looking down at him. It's like, I love that one. That particular panel.
That is true. I'm just looking back.
Right?
I definitely got a very like Batman slaps Robin kind of feeling from the whole sequence. I don't know. It just had that energy for me.
No, but then
let me see if I can do this.
Okay. No, the nose doesn't go up. She's not looking down. She's like,
I'm pretty sure this is a look I gave
Yeah.
a lot of my colleagues all the time whenever they come up with a
no,
topic.
but also remember that Xavier got bitch slapped by Doug, and then he got bitch slapped by Namor. So he keeps getting bitch slapped by each and every one of them, which I thought was like pretty funny. I think maybe that's what Hickman wants to do with Xavier. It's like, no, shut up. Yes, you're being stupid. You're being naive.
That's what I say.
Well, this is another one of those oh, sorry, Peter. I think there's a little bit of an audio delay
go
here.
ahead.
But I think this is another one of those rug pull recontextualizations that Hickman is doing here, that up until now, we've definitely seen Xavier set up to certainly look like the hero in control of this entire Hoxpox story. And what we're seeing here now is Xavier, who in a lot of ways is really getting in over his head. Like he's making himself look like the leader. He's posing as a leader, but he doesn't understand half of what he's doing. And you're right, Tyler, that in every interaction we've seen him try to do something really ambitious as part of his plan, he kind of screws it up totally. Like he just gets his butt handed to him, and he does not really seem to know what he's doing.
Yeah, I mean, I felt a deep sympathy for Moira here, that she's 17 years old here. It's year 17, and she knows she has to get started with something before some of these global events start coming into play. And her choices, she's determined over all these lives, are Xavier, Magneto, and Apocalypse. Like, that's it. There's nobody who's better prepared. There's nobody with a better plan. There's no women other than Selene, I guess, if she wanted to go into the jungles of South America. I personally think that might have been a better plan, but you never know. It just made me really feel sympathy for her. Like, she has to break him. And it goes back to my comment at the end of last episode where I'm like, I thought that there was to be this change in status quo, but Hickman is actually jackhammering the ground underneath the status quo. And this is a part of that. He's basically saying like, well, you know what? The Xavier that you always thought you had, that was like a kinder, gentler Xavier anyway, was useless. And so the reason Xavier is such an asshole and the way he's been made more and more of an asshole all through the years is because it was required. And it wasn't even required narratively. It was required by this character within the narrative in order to get anything done. And he's still bad at it.
Which is partly, I think, why he's bad at it, because throughout all of X-Men history, whenever he is an asshole, he's really been behaving against type. Like, he's basically this kind of dumb but nice guy who wants to get along, but periodically he's kind of slapped around our mind like, no, you have to be tough if mutants are going to survive. And it's just, all right, I'll try. But he's just not good at it.
So here, that kind of like, I was kind of thinking about it, that why then have him on the board? Why not just take him out and then just try to do something with Magneto and Apocalypse? Or is it because the narrative of like Professor Xavier has to be there because it's called X-Men.
Because she's tried that. Because she's tried different lives that isolated only one, and they never work. That she's if it's just Xavier or just Magneto or just Apocalypse, mutants still get wiped out one way or another. So she's down to figuring out, okay, if this is going to work, I'm going to have to get all three of what she's determined are the major players from mutant kind, the most powerful mutants out there, and she's going to have to get them to work together somehow.
Yep.
And I did get the sense that she feels as though she's had some kind of like a more tangible success in what she's trying to do in times that she's worked with Xavier. Like the Magneto one sputtered real fast. I think we established that's the youngest she had ever died.
Yeah.
And the Apocalypse one was like fine, but there's something missing. Is it the winning the hearts and minds? Is it the thinking bigger of who's fittest? We don't know. So it's kind of like she goes back to Xavier because she's like, there was something there and I can maybe bend it enough to be the germination of what will hold up all of these other elements that I need to put into play. And we find out, I mean, this is going to kind of naturally transition into the data pages because we find out Xavier does contribute some significant things to her plan. She did not have this resurrection plan as such until Xavier introduces it. So there is some kind of special spark to having Xavier as her central figure, as the first central figure, even if he can't be the only one long-term because it's not going to work.
But I think the other thing also is at that point in time, she would have figured out that Xavier, when she was 17, Xavier would be one of the strongest telepath around who is able to accept her and, read her mind.
Yeah.
And then she might have also figured out that Xavier eventually will go to space. And that is where he will gain some technological advantage over humans.
That is quite possible. I think it's a huge question whether or not he's been to space in the previous lives. Zach, you were about to chime in there too.
No, I was just agreeing with what you were saying, and I also agree with what Tyler is saying. That I think you're right. That we actually don't know, based on anything we've seen so far, whether she's aware of the Shi'ar at this point, right? She doesn't. We don't know, but she may be. And at this point, she may already have in mind the idea of uploading brains into Cerebro technology that Xavier will later execute. That's still speculation, but I think based on what we've seen, it's entirely possible.
Right, she's aware of Shi'ar as a race, if nothing else, because of Life 9. But she doesn't necessarily know them in the way that we know them in Life 10.
Well, so but we know for a fact that she's familiar with memory crystals because that's how she took back knowledge from Life 9. So I think Tyler, you may have a really good point there that Xavier might be there specifically because he is the telepath who can upload these mutant minds onto the technology that she already knows exists.
Mm-hmm. Any further thoughts on this, the extension here of the bench scene before we move into Moira's journals? Freya?
No, let's just go ahead.
All right. So this, it's almost impossible to summarize quickly anyway. We get several pages of Moira's personal journal as she begins her manipulation of Xavier and watch it go south. And honestly, we could almost respond to every one, and that would be a very long episode, although we could certainly do that if you want to.
Oh, I think we should walk through these. I think that each of these has at least one interesting thing to say about it.
Okay. So the first one is entry number 5 regarding Xavier. So he's finally been recruited to her cause, and she makes this amazing observation that, unlike myself, observation has not granted him perfect recall of my past lives. And as I will not permit him to read me a second time, he's now dependent on my interpretation of past life events. So many interesting things in that little fragment of a paragraph. Let's start with Freya.
I think like this is how you start manipulating people. Like, you withhold information. So this was kind of like, to me, it was like a step 1. Like, it's just like, I'm only letting you access once. And then she's also relying on Xavier's good-naturedness that he's not going to try to access it again. Like, she's still kind of believing in that. Like, she's relying on the hero's goodness to kind of move things forward. But one of the things that kind of stuck out to me is like, it's shameful how much he wants to love these people. Like, to me, that was the takeaway. It's like how her disgust at this, like, that disgust that, that Xavier still wants to love human.
Tyler.
I mean, I had the same read, and I think this is just establishing him as, you know, really naive still and really good still before he is fractured later on.
Zach.
So this first journal entry is our first major clue that, along with the redacted journal entries that are going to follow, that Moira is not being forthright with Xavier. She has parts of her plan that she's not going to tell him. She doesn't trust him with it. We've seen just in our last park bench scene that she has good reason not to trust him with it. He's not really up to this. But she's got a part of the plan up her sleeve that Hickman isn't ready to tell us yet. He's going to keep that off the board for longer into his run. And this is our first big run, that first big clue that is the case.
I definitely had a slightly different read than you all, although I don't know that it conflicts. I think the thing that stuck out to me, first of all, is that she has perfect recall of her past lives. Where did that come from? That's news.
I can tell you. It came from First 15 Lives of Harry August. That's where it came from. Because that was exactly the power level that he had. He was mnemonic, which means he's the only one among all of them who could have a perfect recall of his past.
Well, I think that Hickman actually did make a casual reference to it back in Hawks #2. I don't think he put very much weight on it, but that was part of his initial exposition for how Moira's powers worked.
And so the other side of what I got from this was that I don't know that there's things from her past lives she's necessarily withholding from him, because she says basically she showed him everything. I think it's more to protect herself in the current life, because she knows she's going to want to manipulate him, and that's why she doesn't want to open her mind again. So it's like a shade different than what you were all saying. She's fine with him knowing everything up to this point, but she can't let her not final go at the experiment.
So that could be it, but she does specifically say that he doesn't have perfect recall, whereas she does, and she's not going to let him take a second look, which does seem to suggest to me that there are things that she just doesn't want him to be seeing or aware of. She wants him to be subject to her interpretation.
But it almost feels like a comment about us as the readers being able to kind of comb over this and find all of these little connections. Like, if, you know, we've talked a lot about how it's going to read differently in trade. For somebody who reads it in collected edition, they're not going to go over it with the fine-tooth comb that we've gotten. They're not going to have perfect recall. They're just going to observe and move forward.
Yeah.
Observation is better than preservation.
That's right. Yeah. Which is, I think, Hickman telling us to burn our bookshelves down. So entry number 14 is also about Xavier. And she's really worried here that she's been lying to herself about what she's capable of doing in order to manipulate these men. And she talks about them both, but then she speaks specifically about Xavier and that she can't help but have a romantic link to him. But there's something unspoken here, because she's talking about manipulating these men that seems to also include Magneto, although he's not mentioned by name. And she ends with this very ominous sentence. Her paramount fear is that she fractures his psyche and eventually unleashes something unexpected on the world. Freya, what did you get from this one?
So it felt kind of read like, as a STEM person, you know, I kind of have to deal with a lot of projects, and I feel like this would be also my week 2 entry in my journal, that I am not sure what I'm capable of, or, you know, self-doubt. So it's just like, the first was like, yeah, we're going to do this. And then, well, this is kind of not the second, but we don't, well, did we know what this entry 5, entry 12, what this is this days, months?
No, because it doesn't have any kind of time horizon attached to it.
Right. So it's just kind of like, you know, having a self-doubt. And I think that it kind of fits right in when you're reading someone's, like, you know, when someone has a long project and how they're dealing with their own psyche. I think it's kind of just, to me, it read like that. Also, girlfriend, why are you writing this shit down? Someone's going to read this.
Well, I think there's actually an answer to that we can get from these entries, which is that I think that this is a really strong indication, the sequence here, that all of the data pages we've been reading have been coming from Moira all along. That's a theory that we floated before, and I think that this gives us a really strong case for that, because the tone of this matches what we've been noticing in some of the later data entries, where the tone has been getting more and more frantic and more distressed and upset. And that's the same thing that happens to these journal entries, that Moira seems to realize this plan is spinning out of control and things are not going the way she needs them to. And so the data entries overall are just getting more and more upset. Like, what is going on? We need to bring this back in line.
Yeah.
I mean, I know we are not doing this, but like, do you want to have a guess what entry 12 is? Just random guesses?
No, I have no idea.
Oh, I would like to think that it is the fight between Xavier and Shadow King. I don't know if it fits there, but Shadow King has not appeared in the series so far, and he's definitely one of the big bad. So, but I don't really have a lot to add for 14. I do think that it speaks a little bit of Moira's inherent goodness as well, because she is she actually fell for Xavier, even though she thinks that he's naive and a little bit stupid. But she eventually she still fell for him after she fell for him, like I think 2 or 3 times in her past 9 lives. So yeah.
Zach.
Well, you know what I'm going to say, which is that last line is so clearly a hint that Moira is accidentally responsible for Onslaught. She accidentally caused the most disastrous Marvel crossover of the 90s. And these journal entries are filled with little Easter eggs of continuity nuggets for longtime fans who are going to recognize it. It's typical of the way Hickman has used continuity in the series, that you can read over these journal entries and not catch any of this, and it doesn't really matter. But if you are catching it, you realize that Moira's first stumbles are mistakes that are down the road going to have these disastrous continuity consequences for the X-Men. And Magneto Rocks on Twitter made the really great point that so many of these disasters come during the 90s, and it's almost Hickman making this meta commentary about the way that the X-Men franchise spun off the rails exactly as Chris Claremont left. That's also the point when Moira's plan starts to spin off the rails, and everything that had been going along so well suddenly gets out of control.
Yeah, I definitely felt that. And I would say that the thing that really sticks out here, she's talking about Xavier, but he's not the only subject of this entry, right? So part of it is herself. She's wondering how this is changing her. She's still worried about this, not only the observer effect, but then the reflection of being the observer back on herself, which not only reflects her experience across these lives, but also what she kind of learned in that exchange from the librarian. She's afraid that, and then she's also, again, hinting at how she's manipulating not just Xavier. We haven't seen too much of that in Powers of X in any of the scenes, but that doesn't happen until the next page. So when she says, I believed I could manipulate these men into doing what I needed them to do without any repercussions to myself, it kind of makes me wonder what other things she has her fingers in, even this early in the process. And then all that Onslaught stuff too.
So is that like... So the thing is that if you're talking about, so are we saying that the main 6186 continuity is actually Life 10?
Yes.
Well, at this point,
we've known that for weeks. Life 10 is 616. Everything else is a conspiracy theory.
Yeah, even a terrible, useless editor could confirm that for us at Comic-Con.
Well, I don't follow those things, but I was just because I was kind of wondering though. It's like, because then why was she hidden all this time? Or that was just because she was in the hanging out in the Moira pod all this time?
Yeah, I mean,
she faked her death because she's in 616. She's been dead since like the year 2000, ostensibly, and Hickman has now retconned it to say that she actually faked her death.
Yeah.
Okay.
So entry 17 is one of the most significant for what we've learned across the last 2 issues of House of X, which is that she had a breakthrough with Xavier. He's not trying to fight about the inherent goodness of humanity anymore. He's finally focused on mutants. And the focus that he has on mutants allows him to come up with some aspect of this resurrection plan that she did not fully conceive of previously. And they're lacking mutants with the ability to tweak primal matter or give reality a push. Kind of funny because that really has a lot to do with what Proteus and Legion can do. And she says, I've used my expertise in genetic modification to find potential matches for both Charles and me to produce such a mutant. There are several possibilities. But one thing is certain, Peter is right.
That is if you were to take away one thing from this episode, that is because Peter, I honestly, like, you have been pushing so hard on the Proteus thing as a result of Moira's past lives this entire way through the series, and I was totally skeptical to begin with, but that is 100% on the money. It's exactly what she was doing here.
But aside from me being right, Freya, what did you think about this one that gives a little bit of agency back to Xavier?
I didn't have much thought on it, I'll be honest. Like, this felt like a middle version of things, and I'm just like, okay, sure. Like, so I'll give Tyler the floor.
Okay.
Well, I mean, obviously, the first thing that leapt out to me is, well, Peter is right, and and then we are talking about Proteus and Legion here, but like, I mean, how does he know about Gold Balls at this point in time?
Well, Gold Balls is the one who, no, I guess not. I mean, I think this kind of opens up the question of, like, who knows how many mutants Moira has engineered at this point? Like, we already have talked about how she lived through the chimera process. Like,
that's true.
I still am hardcore that Hope is a product of Moira. Why not Gold Balls? Why not Elixir? Like, who the hell even knows at this point?
They're also kind of cobbling this together as they go. Like, she obviously has a long-term goal here, but it's clear from these entries she doesn't have every detail set. The retcon is not as severe as it may have seemed earlier on in this series. They knew what they wanted to do, but they really were making it up as they went, just like we were seeing all through X-Men history.
And I think also that there will be other factors that she couldn't control. I mean, she cannot control everybody's actions that would actually change events and things like that. So I think that kind of like plays into it. But then it kind of leave a little bit of so I mean, like, Xavier is not supposed to know that Gabriel had Legion.
Yeah.
So this kind of sort of retcon it, and it kind of makes him kind of bad right from the beginning. I mean, a little bit earlier than we have seen.
But does it? Because she never says that because I had that thought. I absolutely am with you. I'm not trying to disagree. But then I went back and said, well, she never says in who the matches will be. She just says that she has several possibilities. So who knows if Xavier knew that Legion was born? This could have been Moira keeping an alternate in her back pocket, especially after Proteus goes so hideously wrong. And then years go by before Charles becomes aware of Legion, who, surprise, is also under Moira's control.
Well, it could actually be Moira trying to push Xavier and Gabriel together.
Yeah. But the other ramification of that is that Xavier's joining and treatment of Gabriel Haller, which we find out about in Uncanny X-Men 161, is also how he meets Magneto in the 616 universe.
Yeah, and by the way, nice fake job pretending that he was so surprised when Magneto revealed he had powers. Like, what? You're a mutant? I had no idea!
Okay. So, Zach, anything else you want to add about this one?
I will just zoom in on Moira's use of the phrase primal matter here, which is one of those key phrases that we've seen both in the context of this idea of the abyss, this primal matter that precedes even creation itself, and which was specifically referenced by the Nimrod of the future when he talked about those primordial particles that make up the universe, those Kerbons. That essentially is what we're being told here, which is actually really like universally significant in the context of this series. Proteus has the ability to alter primordial Kerbons, the very building blocks of the universe. He's even more powerful than we ever knew.
The other thing that occurred to me, and then I'll wrap on this entry, which is that it seems like certain events are going to happen regardless of what they do, and perhaps that one of them might be the genocide at Genosha. And it seems to me that this is Xavier finally getting past the idea of like, maybe humans won't kill millions of us, to get to the idea of like, what if it doesn't matter if they kill millions of us? And this is something that Moira has been actually trying to solve for several iterations right now. And I get the feeling that even with the power of Apocalypse in Life 9, the Apocalypse Wars kind of set them so specifically against mutants that that it was immaterial were killed because they had a much more adversarial relationship early on. And so I do kind of enjoy this because it gives a little bit of agency back to Xavier as somebody who's got a plan. And as we see, that spins out of control pretty quickly. So before it spins out of control, the next entry, number 22, regards the recruiting of Magneto. Freya, any thoughts on the recruiting of Magneto as recast by Moira here?
I was just more fascinated by Moira's take on Magneto. Like, what sets Xavier apart? Like, she was saying that Magneto, you always have to earn his loyalty, and that, that the fact that his rage, that I think, like, it feels like she's kind of also talking about her limit, that no matter how much she can bend Xavier, she is not sure if she can actually do anything about his rage and what he has gone through, and about that. So to me, it was just kind of like that stood out more.
Tyler?
I think the one thing is that she initially calls Magneto Xavier's shade.
Yes.
On the bench there. And then over here, she delved a little bit more into it. But the other thing also is that, is the Krakoa idea Xavier's then? Or is that Magneto's idea? Because she actually implanted the idea of stronghold in his mind.
So I just want to zoom in on that phrase, because there's a really, really clear double meaning there. That in the context of this entry, the surface level meaning is obviously that she's imprinted the idea of mutants forming a nation to themselves. And that does point toward Krakoa, which also implies, by the way, that it's Moira's idea. It's not Xavier's or Magneto's. It's something that comes from Moira. But of course, as we know, stronghold is also a term for a universal level intelligence made up of at least 5 titans. And so this is where I think we can, and I will speculate by starting to put the clues together of what ultimately is Moira up to in order to allow her achievements to live on past this 10th life. We know that she is familiar with the idea of titans and strongholds and dominions. We know that she knows that by access to the Godhead, you can outlive the death of the universe and your accomplishments can survive you. We know that she knows that mutants of a certain level of intelligence, enough mutants together, can collapse into a self-singularity and thereby actually become a Titan-level intelligence. So when I speculated on the previous episode that is there a secret purpose to what's going on with uploading all of these mutant minds into Cerebro in 5 different locations such that it could form a stronghold, I think that this is it. I think this is what Moira's up to. And when I pose the question, does Xavier know about it? I think that what these journal entries point toward is no, he doesn't, but Moira does. This is her plan, and she hasn't told anybody else yet. Those are the redacted journal entries, and maybe that is the right choice she's going to make that results in an 11th life that is different from the other 10.
Yeah, and I want to actually just roll this discussion right into the next one about Apocalypse, because there's the sense here that she, as Zach, I think, just pointed out, she's playing each of these men separately. That's why she doesn't necessarily want Xavier to be crawling around in her head all of the time. She has an indication from Magneto about strongholds. She didn't try to imprint that on Xavier necessarily to the point that she had to call it out. And now she talks about Apocalypse, and that, rather than try to engage him at this point, it's actually a game of keeping the Omega mutants away from him. Whereas she could go and disclose all this information to him. Maybe it would actually affect his actions and prevent some of the things that he would, transpire after this. But she's playing each one of them separately. That's part of how she's breaking the rules. So let's go around again. Any thoughts on the Apocalypse recruitment and lack thereof?
No, I thought that, that was like a bold move on her. Like, I was like, it was just felt like this is the right thing to do. Apocalypse, like, he's too hot right now. We're not going to touch him. And, so we're going to come back to it at a different time when the time is right. So that's the game that she's playing. But to my question was, though, the Omega level mutants that she's talking about here, those are the mutants that Hickman established in House of X1, correct? Not the previously known Omega mutant?
Well, according to Hickman, that's a major retcon. He's like, anybody we used to call Omega was BS. This is the Omega
Right.
list.
So
Right.
she
Yeah. And if we go by the idea that every data page that we've seen is coming from Moira's data entries, then I think we can assume that list of Omegas is her list of Omegas.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because I was kind of thinking about because that's why I wanted to ask the question that if this is 616 being played, did she successfully do that? Did she kept those Omega level mutants from Apocalypse?
Well, the closest I think he ever gets to getting his hands on one of them is the fact that Legion winds up causing the Age of Apocalypse, which now we have confirmation on has not occurred in one of her past lives.
Right.
Yeah.
So she was somewhat successful. Is that the...
I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. That's why she had to make sure Xavier still would recruit that poor, dumb, bird-winged guy, because that would distract Apocalypse from getting his hands on anybody more useful.
It also kind of leads the question that then did she kind of gave fake information about these other mutants are Omega level, so don't look at these. So it just was that like something that she have done.
I think yes.
I think you can definitely read it that way. I think you can definitely say that our false understanding of Omega mutants up to this point has been deliberate misdirection.
Moira was at it all this time.
Oh, that's such a good read. I love that.
It's really good.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I have moments.
Sure, Psylocke, you're Omega. Go for it. Like,
yeah,
that's right. That's what I took from it.
Get down.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I took from it. It's all this
Tyler's
a very.
I mean, this basically she has done this before, right? She woke Apocalypse in Life 9, and she knows that after he wakes up at that point in time how he's liked, so she knows how to manipulate and time it properly, and so I think that makes sense.
But does it also kind of raise the question that she's the one who raised him this time as well, or no?
No, I don't think so. Because she woke him up way earlier in Life 9.
No, I know, but this is Life 10, so she's just just waking him up in the first way that he woke up. But because it says Apocalypse had made himself known to the world, but it doesn't say anything about like how he was, like it doesn't say. It just kind of reads funny. Like it's like, oh, she have already did something to wake him up, and now he just made himself known. I don't know, just kind of felt a little. Maybe I'm reading too much into it. Sorry.
No, well, the backstory for Apocalypse isn't that he was literally asleep that whole time. It's that he was waiting for mutants to have enough of a presence on the planet Earth that he felt the time was right for him to come and make sure that they were ascendant and that the strongest would survive. So he was just waiting and watching before mutants came to his attention, and this just happened to occur at this point.
And also, not for nothing, she mentions it in the context of Xavier and Magneto. And if we think about when Apocalypse has made himself known to the world, Xavier's in space, Magneto's in the declining period of his control over the New Mutants. The X-Men are presumed dead, or about to be presumed dead at that point, because we're talking about Fall of the Mutants, pretty much. This entry is made during or just after Fall of the Mutants. And so it's kind of interesting that, like, it almost implies that Apocalypse would have been waiting for a power vacuum to make himself known to the world. And because Moira is associated with the powers that are in vacuum, that's why she can't approach him.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
All right. So this last page, I think we can tackle all three together because they have to do with specific things we've seen already. So entry 48 has to do with what we saw with Charles and Eric going to Bar Sinister without Moira's knowledge. This confirms, and she is not happy about it. And she also realizes that purely by their intervention with Sinister, he immediately creates a chimera decades early. Then entry 52 says that she's lost Magneto, which is clearly a reference to the schism, which clearly associates it with mutant genesis and X-Men 1 through 3, as we've been talking about all this time. And then finally, the entry 57 says she's decided to remove herself from the world. So it implies that she and Charles actually collaborated to create the elaborate Shi'ar Golem field hoax of her death in dreams end. And she says, we'll fake my death using a replica, and I will return to the shadows where I belong. Freya, what were your thoughts about these closing entries?
Like, it just become the shadow queen, I guess, like, going back into the hiding to kind of pull all the string. It just felt like that, like, but yeah, I mean, it just like, it felt a little bit detached how she's writing. Like, it felt like, she was kind of losing it a little bit. And then, there was not, it just very quick that, we're doing this. And then, yeah, it just kind of ended. But one of the things I wanted to kind of bring out, and I think once we go the round table, I'll talk about it. So Tyler.
I think for this is, Sinister, first chimera, these are information which we have seen. But I think the three entries, except for 57 is basically just giving us more clarity what the Shi'ar Golem is when it was first mentioned in the chat, at the end of House 2. But I think 52 itself, all these entries kind of like points to the fact that this is, in 616. And so I think, that's where I'm coming from for these three.
Zach.
So these entries to me are truly the beating heart of this issue and the strongest voice of this issue. And there's this passage in entry 48 that I think is the single most powerful thing that Hickman wrote in this entire series and recontextualizes so much of it. What is this thing that men do where they think they can shape the world to their liking and bend others to whatever they will? This is folly. This is so much the heart of the series because it suddenly makes text the feminist subtext that we've seen running all throughout this. That every time we've said to ourselves or to each other on the show, why has Moira disappeared from this narrative? She's excluded from the Krakoan government. Why isn't she there? Why is it the men running things? Well, this is why. This wasn't supposed to be the plan. She is getting shunted aside more and more, and these men have taken over and in their arrogance made these decisions that are making this plan spin farther and farther and farther off the rails. And so this tone of panic that we see creeping into these entries isn't Moira just being crazy old Moira. It's Moira responding to the fact that these men are trying to take control because they are so sure that they can do things better. And I think that is enormously powerful and frankly, something surprising from Jonathan Hickman. It was not what I expected to see in this series, and I'm very, very impressed by it.
Freya, were you getting those feminist overtones from this or not?
Because when I read men, I thought that it was human that she was talking about, but that just, and also like the whole meta commentary and all that. But I can connect to that actually. It's just, I'm not necessarily one of those people who kind of like to think that just because I'm being shunted aside, that it's like, oh, men are against me. It's just so restrictive way of thinking because it's a good chance that the idea was better and you didn't do a good job at controlling. I mean, that's just how it is. I don't like to deflect my failure on other people doing something different. You know what I mean? So from that point of view, it didn't sound all that feminist to me.
Yeah. Well, and there's an interesting...
Well, but we're seeing them make mistakes that she knows.
Read it.
So,
yeah, I think Freya's response there really makes me reread this page with a slightly different opinion. Because first she's saying this thing that men do, whether she means men as a gender or men as human. But then in the next entry, she says, I'm just as bad as they are, if not worse. So it's like, at first she's kind of pointing a finger like, they're off the plan. They went off what we agreed. And then she says, you know what, maybe I'm just as bad in the things I'm doing. And then her third reaction is, I've actually become way too involved in this experiment to the point that I'm actually constituting a variable that's no longer controlled. So it kind of starts in a more accusatory way, and it winds up in a much more self-reflective way. And that's why I think there's such an interesting sequence to look at together.
Well, yeah, and part of the sequence of the scene that follows it too. I mean, these don't totally stand alone, but while at the same time, she is seeing herself make mistakes trying to hold the plan together and ultimately removing herself from the plan in order to preserve it. She's also, I don't give a lot of truck to the idea that Xavier and Magneto could be making better decisions, because we're so clearly seeing that they're not, particularly the recruitment of Sinister. Well, we know that she knows from a previous life that this guy manufactured the entire downfall of Krakoa and the death of mutant kind. She's the one, now we know, refers to him as the devil who you should never ever trust. And then they go and recruit him and bring him onto this plan without her knowledge. It's completely and utterly insane. She has a right to be furious.
But the thing is, like, you think that he's bad because she told you. Like, it's her narration. So you're being, like, you're just believing her side of the story. You haven't heard their side of the reason. And then if she's willing to bring in Apocalypse, why can't they bring in Sinister? Isn't that a good thing? Keep your enemies close, friends close, enemies closer. Because
so I think that we have seen their side of it, and I think that their side of it is Hawks. I think that, especially when we see the final scene of Hawks replayed here in the following scene, there's a read here where you can definitely see House of X as the sort of official Magneto and Xavier propaganda version of the Miracle of Krakoa. And then what we have here is the Moira MacTaggart, no, don't believe any of the authorities, don't trust the man version of the real hidden truth behind Krakoa. I think that's something that occurred to me when I read it, and I think it's a really interesting read on those two series in tandem with each other.
Possible, but no, I mean, that's just a thing. Like, I was surprised to find out that that people thought, like, well, I heard it from two of you that this is like a more of a feminist thing. I'm like, no, this is like a scientist thing. It got nothing to do with her being a woman. It's to do with her being an observer or a scientist person, a science mind. Like, she just, like, her reaction to these things are very similar to what her reaction would have been if she was a man. I don't know. I mean, it just, maybe her writing is the way that she's writing it because of a woman, but it's not, I don't know. That's what I thought.
But I think that you make a really good case there, but I think that in order to make that case, you sort of have to exclude things that are going to be clear to readers and that are probably going to be clear to the writer, which is that she is a woman and the other three players that she's recruited who are key to this are not. And they get to be visible and in charge, and she gets to be shunted down in this no space, seen by no one, not openly acknowledged for anything. I mean, that's right there in the text. And to not acknowledge that as something that deliberately or accidentally is a reflection of so much of the role that women end up playing in real life society, I think is to turn a blind eye to something that the text is really making clear.
But the thing is, like, she's choosing to do this. That's what I'm saying. No one's telling her to do this. She is choosing to do this. So why, because it kind of is a meta commentary on how four of us got together, and then four of us are finishing this, right? In a lot of ways. And I have, like, we have talked about it and on, but I am not going to, like, I'm going to take the responsibility of the choices that I'm making in this. And I'm not going to say that, oh, it was Tyler, Peter, and Zach, those men. No, I'm not going to, because that's just the dumbest thing to do. And that's what I'm saying. Like, it just kind of, I mean, to me, it was like, oh, I don't know.
I think this is one of the most fascinating conversations that can be an outcome of this series. Honestly, I'm really interested in it, and I could just sit here and listen to it because I think some of what causes me to want to label this as feminist in some way. And let's remember, feminism is about equality. It's not about women or Moira being right necessarily. I can't help but see it as a reaction to some of Hickman's other work. And I think that's why it hit me, because especially Manhattan Projects, which I love so much, it's historically rooted in our own real world history. And necessarily it is dominated by the men who hold the reins of science, the reins of innovation, and by power. And it's a fantastic series if you like that sort of alternate world history stuff. And one of the complaints that people have lodged against it and against Hickman in many other iterations, including his New Avengers and Illuminati, is like, where where's the voice of the women in this setting? Really, like Invisible Woman is one of the only women who's been like at the table and across all of Hickman's runs except for Secret Warriors, which is a different kind of run. And so then to read this page where we have Moira very much at the table and not only like mad that the other players have taken it away from her, but then also realizing her own culpability feels very unique to me in terms of things that Hickman has written. And the fact that he's like taken the time to put it on the page and centers Moira's realization, whether or not she was right and whether or not the men were in the wrong, to me feels like really powerful and like the thing I've been asking for from Hickman for years now.
Yeah, but the thing is, like, I also, like, you know, reading Hickman's book, I don't think he thinks about these things. I don't think it matters to him. Like, that's the thing I'm trying to say. Like, it doesn't matter to him that Moira is a woman. Moira happens to be the character that was there, and she happens to be a woman. I don't think, like, it was... He doesn't do it that way. Because, you know, the thing is, like, even when he was assembling the Avengers and all of that, Captain Marvel was, like, you know, only one, and he just lost interest because she wasn't all that interesting character to begin with.
But there's such a thing as an author making a corrective. And I think it's entirely possible that Hickman has seen that this is something that he has not explored in his work, and maybe has even taken to heart that people have criticized the fact that he hasn't explored it in his work. And I mean, look, you judge an author based on the text they give us. And what I'm seeing in this text is Moira is referring to men. She is a woman in a world of men. She is invisible while the men are visible. That's there. And while we can say that in the past, these are things that Hickman has not been interested in, and I agree that he has not been interested in it, I see that here in this issue.
Yeah, I guess I would just reiterate, I'm fascinated by both sides of this conversation. And the thing that's interesting to me is that Hickman has given us text that allows us to have this conversation. I think to get to this conversation previously, we would be really far off the page in terms of what we were interpreting. And I find it fascinating that we get to have this talk. That to me is the thing that's interesting about it, regardless of if Zach's interpretation about Hickman's intent is more right or Faria's.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying that people cannot, you know, excel. Like, you know, people cannot have a different ideas and stuff, like, you know, or change their ideas as they're becoming, like, you know, as they're growing as a writer. But I think, like, reading his stuff, that's what I kind of always got, that he doesn't care about gender, race. It's just the play, like, these are the team players and this is what I'm going to use. I don't care if that's not, you know, there's no interesting women character. I'm not going to try to make it, like, you know, do something to augment them. I'm just going to go with whatever the chess piece is available, and I'm going to play with that. At least that's what his Avengers read to me.
Let's talk about this idea of, in terms of the next scene, about if people really change and the chess pieces that they decide to engage with. Because here we are in the final scene here with Moira in the no place and Xavier and Magneto coming feeling quite victorious that they have established a government, and they're bringing her some tea, which she kind of says, why are you even bothering to make this nicety? I am able to go to the outside world. And the whole scene kind of plays out with Xavier and Magneto very smug. They've come back together. Magneto's never going to abandon his brother Xavier ever again, and they've got it under control. Moira can stay in the shadows and everything's going to be fine. Or at least that was the thing that I got from Xavier and Magneto here. But I'm already projecting myself onto this instead of just observing. Freya, what did you get from this final scene of finally seeing Moira in the present day?
Like, yeah, it was a lot of information, like, you know, information that we have seen happened. It's just a rehashing of all of that. But I think, like, what really stuck out to me is her hatred for destiny, or not just necessarily hatred, but, you know, it's just like, she's not coming back. Like, you know, it's like that, you know, we cannot bring back anyone who has precog, you know, just because it's not going to help our plan. But it also kind of, listening to all you guys talk about it, just how I'm kind of changing my mind is about, like, is it because she's gonna know something about her and going to reveal that and she's scared of that? That's why she doesn't want to bring her back? Or there's truly a reason?
I mean, that's the way I read it. I mean, the reason why she doesn't want Destiny back is not because Destiny, you know, is her nemesis, but it's the fact that precogs will know what she's trying to do, even if they only know by having glimpses and pieces of information. That is going to make her plan, her eventual plan, her real plan, a lot more difficult to realize. And I also come to realize that this is the second schism between the three of them. So it's a schism between Xavier, Magneto, and Moira, because Moira is clearly not part of the, or at least at this point, not part of the team that's making the decision now.
Well, she's acquiescing to the decisions, but she's clearly not the active decision maker that she was up until this point.
Yeah.
So yeah, I have I think the same read on this that you do. You know, the ostensible reason that we're given for no precogs on Krakoa is that they would know the truth that mutants always lose. But there definitely is a sense that Moira is not giving them the full picture, particularly because when we saw Destiny back in Moira's Life 3, she didn't say that. That's not what she told Moira. It wasn't, you know, don't bother trying to get mutants to succeed. They always lose. It was, I have seen the result of your great work and I am not pleased. So whatever Moira is doing, Destiny doesn't like it. And I think that she does seem to have a very personal reason for not wanting Destiny to come back. But I will point out that this is another Peter was right moment, because the notion of Destiny's resurrection being the token that Mystique received in exchange for her good behavior is in fact completely true. What we didn't know up until this point was that the behavior they were trying to get Mystique to acquiesce to was being on the council. They wanted her to take a government seat, and the price was bring Destiny back.
So can Destiny see the past as well, or is it just the future?
Well, she lived through the past. But no, she can't. I'm not sure whether she can see Moira's other lives. You know, she managed to suss out that Moira had lived multiple lives back in Life 3. Her powers are mysterious, so maybe it's not totally clear.
Right. Because at this point, other than Xavier and Magneto, no one else knows about her power, correct?
No. Yeah, I think that's true at this point.
Yeah, unless there are other characters who know that we haven't been told in this series. No. I mean, if we find out there are others, it'll be a surprise later on.
Who knows about who? So,
Peter?
I think the thing that we haven't said explicitly here, which is really important, is the reason for the no precogs thing is not just exclusive to Moira's plan or Moira's life, and it's not just exclusive to Xavier and Magneto's plan. It's because of this inherent fear that they're delaying the impossible, which is that mutants will always lose, right? Did anybody say that explicitly yet? I know there's like some delay, and I feel like I might be lagging a little bit. But that's
I did.
really...
I said that's the ostensible reason for no precogs on Krakoa.
So yeah, I think that's interesting.
Oh, I'm sorry, you went out for a second there, Peter. What was that?
Although... I'm afraid my internet might be dwindling. So, you know, sometimes when a big boat, this is true. Sometimes when a big boat goes by New Zealand and like they drag their anchor or something happens, because there's like 1 or 2 big internet pipes that bring the internet into New Zealand. Literally the entire country has a slow internet day. And it just happened the other day. We're like, hope you aren't doing anything on the internet today, New Zealand, because the entire internet is slow here for 3 hours as the pipe. I don't know what happens. Like it's waiting to be undossled. I don't know.
That is the most adorably quaint New Zealand fact I think I've ever heard.
I'm almost positive it's real.
No, I'm sure that I'm saying that. Are we sure the hobbits are not throwing a party and then taking all the Are we sure about that?
It could be. I mean, it could be Hobbit and Middle Earth related. I don't know. I this has been told to me by many actual Kiwis, so I don't know if they just say this to punk Americans who are like used to really fast internet or not. But I'm just putting it out there. So okay, so I'm sorry for repeating that point a little bit. But I mean, the thing that I just really get from this is that they've like taken it from her. Like there's this very kind of like pat on the head. We've got this now. You've outlived your usefulness kind of quality to this. Like what exactly is she doing in the no place at all, other than just being kept safe and alive, right? It kind of feels like they're just keeping her in a bubble because she's got to stay in a bubble, but they're like, let us be the stewards of this. And it really makes me wonder, like, that really feels like a loaded gun for the rest of Hickman's run. There's no way Moira's going to stay in the bubble. And there's so many different indications of how it's going to end, right? Destiny absolutely is coming back. There's no question. Sure. It's going to happen at this point. Is Moira going to try to plot on her own with Apocalypse, who we have no indication knows about her yet? Quite possibly. possibly, based on the things we've heard her say in her diary already, this issue, that it's not quite time to approach him yet, is Moira going to go to her constant co-conspirator, Wolverine, to plan some kind of insurgency or revolution, because that is what he does, quite possibly. And then the other thing I started to get as I read and reread the scene is maybe this is actually way more feminist than I even originally thought. And then we're going to see a story about Xavier and Magneto and Apocalypse royally messing everything up and being replaced by some women who should be in charge of this, namely Jean, Emma, and Moira, or I mean Jean, Emma, and Mystique, who are on the other 3 panels of the government. And so who knows? These are not necessarily projections so much as things that I see teased here, but I think there's a lot of interesting thematic material, and this is pretty much Hickman laying out the full menu of what could be possible over the course of the next couple of years and saying just pick your meal, because there's a lot of stuff coming up in this run.
Yeah.
And to the point that why is she hiding there? Why can't she just go in, hang out, live her life? I don't know, go to New Zealand, where apparently you lose internet because of
just keep her in New Zealand. It's gonna be fine. Only 2 disasters Marvel's
because
had.
it's getting too dangerous. It's getting too dangerous. I mean, remember, her life is the only thing that allows our universe a chance of success. She has to live long enough for this plan to work. She's being tucked away in this bubble for the protection, not just of herself, but for the universe. But there is such an impossibly condescending tone when they tell her this. I mean, they genuinely just send her off with a pat in the back. It's hey, you should be proud of yourself. You did a really good job. And then they say, but now it is time for you to step aside and let us do the good work. Just take a seat, little lady. Now is the time for the men to take charge. I mean, this is when I talk about the feminist tone that shows through here, it's really those lines that I think stronger than anything just make Magneto and Xavier sound impossibly condescending toward Moira. And whether or not you read it from a specifically feminist lens, these 2 people look like jerks.
Oh yeah, to me, I mean, regardless of any kind of feminism in the read, this to me as a scene was Xavier and Magneto are the villains. They're absolutely going to fail. This is how plots work. We are giving this information now.
Yeah. I mean, the whole exchange where Xavier says, when Moira says, you cannot do that. And Xavier's we know. And then Moira repeats again, you absolutely cannot bring back any precog. And he just says, we know.
Yeah,
we know.
And then they ignore it. And then they go out and we see that replay of the phrase that we saw in Hawk 6. Just look at what we have made. And we've just seen from this entire issue, it's not what they made. It's what Moira made. And they're going to stand out there under the fireworks and this big Ewok party and take credit for something they know they should not be taking credit for.
But we could also include Moira. I'm just not understanding that why it...
Because we literally just saw them to tell her to take a seat and stay down in the nose space a scene earlier, a page earlier. You don't put that juxtaposition there unless you want readers to make the connection. This is very clearly them taking credit for work they did not do. This is somebody else's homework.
Go for it. Sorry, Tyler.
No. Go.
Faria, you are a Xavier and Magneto apologist. You are just making excuses for these 2 jerks now.
To be honest, though, I'm actually making excuses for women. Always, I'm actually standing up against women. Always saying they love.
That's the full quote. Faria says, "I'm standing up against women."
Yeah, go for it. Because fucking ladies do not know how to fucking get up and take their position when they need to. No one is telling Moira to do this. No, but her own. She is making these decisions. So that's one of the reasons I'm saying, why am I excusing her? Because she's the one choosing to be under, just leave behind the shadow and let these men take credit for her work.
No, but that's not the point that we are trying to, at least I think that's not the point that we are trying to say. What we are saying is that, yes, Moira chose to remove herself to be from being an active participant, but the attitude that Xavier and Magneto came at her is condescending.
Right. That's the takeaway here.
Yeah,
they're willing to stand out there and take credit for something they know they didn't do.
Yeah. So it's
condescending thing, it could be if it was Moira substitute her with anyone else, would they not have the same condescending view? Is that what I'm hearing? Because knowing Magneto and Xavier, what do you guys know them more than I do? Would they not have the same attitude?
That's exactly the point. These two are condescending jerks, and it's not the picture that we've been given of them explicitly up until this issue. This is confirming what we do know about them, which is that these two assholes are getting in way above their station. They are taking credit for things they didn't do. They are utterly sure of themselves while executing an extremely uncertain plan that they don't even know the full details of.
I'm asking that whether they are equal opportunity asshole. That's what I'm asking.
No, I know what you're trying to say. You're just saying that, yes, they are being a jerk. Yes, they are being condescending. But this does not mean that it is feminist.
Exactly. That's what I'm trying to say.
I think that's what you're trying to say.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say. It's like, we cannot say that, oh my God, two men once talked down. Because if that's the case, all of you guys are fucking chauvinist. That's what I'm trying to say. All these 12 episodes, because, that's what happens. You're always explaining to me, but I don't see it that way because I genuinely know less about X-Men. Therefore, you guys are educating me. If that made any sense.
I'm not trying to educate you. That's never been the mission of this show.
I am no, but what I'm saying is I am learning this because I'm putting myself in here. If you know what I mean, is that,
But I completely take your point, but here's the question that I find genuinely interesting about this scene. In this scene, who knows the most and who's being explained to? Because Moira, even if this is not her current plan, still has 9 other lives of which she has perfect recall. And let's just remove all of the gender from all 3 of these people, because I'm less interested in that. I'm more interested in establishing that Xavier and Magneto are villains. Okay, that's my thesis statement here. I think that this absolutely proves that Xavier and Magneto are the villains of this story. Full stop. Without saying anything about anybody's gender.
No, I'm completely with you all. But the problem is she is not, even though she had all this knowledge, she doesn't have the knowledge of the now, what's been going on behind once they leave Moira's no space. So, it just, why is it that this is supposed to be why are we saying that they're being condescending to her? I mean, they're just being condescending, they're just assholes. That's all that is. It's just not, she doesn't know any more than them.
Well, she does, because we've been seeing in these journal entries that she has a part of this plan that she hasn't been telling them. And that ultimately this plan does come down to something that she has been trying to organize them to execute, that they're now going to step out and take public credit for.
I didn't see it that way.
And I mean, they literally tell her,
know if
now
any
is
of
the
you
time for you to step aside. And I don't know how you read that sentence in a way that's not condescending. Whether or not you read it as chauvinistically condescending is up to you, but it's absolutely condescending.
I don't know. I mean, to me, it's just maybe she just outlived her usefulness. I mean, she's not doing anything to tell them that, no, I'm still useful because of this reason. So
I think that's a fair point, but that's how, at least for me, I chose to read as, her taking herself off the board does not give Xavier and Magneto the right to speak down to her that way. You know what I mean? And because, there's one part where she says that, do you really want them to know that we always lose? And then Xavier and Magneto is like, well, we are different now. What do you mean we'll always lose?
They are certainly very sure of themselves for a plan that, given what the reader has now learned, looks more rickety than ever. Krakoa is not built on the sound foundations that we were told it was built on. This thing could fall apart at any time, and yet Xavier and Magneto seem very, very sure that they're going to pull it off, despite us knowing that there are 9 previous lives of them never pulling off anything they try to do.
I don't know, guys. But anyway, this was fun. We should have done this more often. Like,
Yeah,
just
this is what the show is always supposed to be. We finally hit it. We finally hit the right rhythm in the last episode.
Right, in the very last episode. All right. Yeah. So then, Peter, do you have anything more to add?
No, I mean, I think I've put down my plot chips for my next bets here, and I'm very interested to see which of them turn up. So much as I'll continue to follow this.
No, yeah. So it ends with the party scene that we have seen in HiX-6, and then we finally figured out who said the word "I'm not ashamed of what I am." Are you satisfied with this?
Yep.
The mystery Tyler's been waiting to see solved all through the series.
Right. So all the mysteries. Tyler's been thinking about this one. So thank you all so much for joining me on this journey, and joining, and then all the viewers for joining us with this journey. And it was unbelievably educative for me because as a new mutants coming into this, there's so much I learned. Not to mention Zach's biblical corner. I mean, my God, philosophical corner. Wasn't there also a mythological corner at one point?
That's right. We hit all three of the major bases.
Well, right. And then there was so much fun had by all. And as with Marvel events, we're now going to, this was an event, and now we're going to go to do our separate solo series that we're going to live on for a little while until the next event happen, and we may come together, or it may be a different team, or it may not be no team at all. I don't know what's going to happen.
One thing's for sure, the universe will never be the same again.
Never going to be the same again. And you know what? We're you can follow Peter, Zach, and Tyler all on Twitter. You can I'm going to disappear now, but
into the no space for the preservation of the plan.
Right. Yeah. For the preservation of the plan, I am going to disappear because if I die, the universe will end tomorrow, you guys. But once again, it was a pleasure to host this and to have you all and to entertain all of you. So Peter, for the last time, bring us home.
Inferno 2.0.
Good night, everyone.